I did, Sunshine. How about you? Oops. Shut the wrong thing. Hey, Amy. Welcome, welcome. Honestly, I worked most of the weekend. Hey, Carrie, how are you? Did a lot of recording this weekend. They are. If you go over to the tubes of you, and look up my username, UndeadPapa, you will find my channel. And if you go under lives, they're all in there. Wings! Where have you been? Hey, Chrissy, how are you? Deborah, welcome in. Oh, nice. You were unwell? Well, I am glad you were back. It was noticed that, just so you know, we noticed that you weren't here. So, if I didn't see you tonight, I was going to be reaching out to you to find out what's going on. But I am glad you're here. Well, you got it here, you know that. Hey, Eddie, welcome in, brother. Susie Q, welcome. Are you looking at the right screen? Of course we notice, Wings. Hey, Timothy, how are you? Hey, Peggy, welcome back. Well, TikTok is telling me to remind you all to like and share and repost if you can. It's like, do this. I'm like, okay, chill. Where did my stuff go? Jasmine, no, I haven't. Is that like I'm assuming it's a children's book? Thanks for noticing. I don't know. It's just something I got off of a stock site. Hey, Jules, how are you? Well, I will add the Mighty to my list of stuff to take a look at. I appreciate all the suggestions because sometimes I'm looking around going, what do I need? What do I read next? But tonight's going to be fun. This is one actually I've never read, so Brittany. Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate that. Hey, Yuritsa, how are you? Welcome back. The Color of Magic. Well, I will definitely look it up. Well, that's enough of a recommendation for me. A news channel? No, definitely not a news channel. We don't do news in this space, especially not these days. Thank you. Drywall and Beans. Well, stick around. We'll be starting to read it here in a couple minutes. Yeah, this is one that I've actually never read, so shall be interesting. It's a fly joke. Well, we did James and the Giant Peach actually last month. And that was a great read. I actually have never seen the movie. Hey, CZ, how are you? Iris, tonight is the BFG by Roald Dahl. Wings, yes you are. You are still the Storytime goblins. And actually, I have something related to that when we hit 25,000 followers. So... yeah, it's on my watch list. Unfortunately, my watch list is longer than a CVS receipt. So, hey, Marcy, welcome in. Hey, DM Johnson, how are you? Well, we're going to start reading it here in a couple of minutes. Yeah, Moss and the Motorcycle was a fun one. Yep, we did that, back in January, I think. Yeah, we're going to be doing half the book tonight, and then we'll be finishing it tomorrow. So, everybody lock in. How do I repost? You should be able to. I think there's like 3 dots and whatnot. You can go through and repost it there like you would repost any other TikTok video. But sharing it works too. And I appreciate it. Isn't it great, Wings? We've got such a good crowd. I love these people. So, yeah, we'll get started here in just a minute. Just giving a little bit of extra time for people to filter in. Bake Baby, yes, I came back. Oh, DM Johnson, I appreciate you, brother. I really do. Or sister. Just like looked and going, what? No, I appreciate you either way. Oh, you are very welcome. I do this because I enjoy it. And, yeah. Hey, Angela. Yeah. I gotta remember not to make assumptions. Hey, John VA, how are you, sir? All right, well, yep, it is time to get going here. Hey, Linda, how are you? Oh, Dusk. You know, honestly, this is one I'm doing a cold read on this one. I have not read it before. Oh, Jasmine, thank you. I used to read that one to my kids, and you get into the voices on that one. Come into my parlor, said the spider to the fly. Rahuna, welcome. Iris, you're very welcome. There are a few people that are in the same boat that come in here, and I appreciate it, and I'm glad I can be of service. Truly. Blossom, thank you. It's gonna be a wonderful trip. And Gary, welcome in. All right, well, let's get started. Baked BB, I say hey. I'm glad you're here. Oh, I'm glad you found me again. All right, well, where's my script? Actually, this is my recording booth. It's actually it's 6 foot by 6 foot by 7 foot tall, and it's all constructed out of 1 inch PVC. And I am currently surrounded by moving blankets that are actually clipped to the top rung of the PVC, and then the sign that you see behind me is something that my youngest daughter gave me a few years ago, and oh no, I'm sorry to hear that, Amber. If you go to my profile and make sure you've notifications turned on for all of it, that way you'll get notified when I go live. That's the thing that we've been trying to tell people, so that because they come in and they say the same thing. I haven't seen you on my FYP for a while. Yeah, because TikTok doesn't like to distribute to the people that actually follow me, which is so weird. Rachel, I am just starting the story tonight. Just starting it. So yeah, about my studio setup. Yep, I finally put this together, and I've only done like 1 or 2 lives with it so far. Yeah, the moving blankets are fantastic. Una, thank you. We are a fun bunch. All right. Well, I'm going to get started here because we've got a good chunk of people in the room. Well, I am 51, if that's of any consequence, Sunshine. Yeah, the Wednesday pre-show. That was such a weird night, but it was the as far as like the overall distribution of the live, but it was so much freaking fun. I loved that. Tessa's she's one of my favorite people. She really is. Hey, Sarah, how are you? All right. Well, I'm going to get started here. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Storytime with UndeadPapa. This is Sunday Night Bedtime Stories. Tonight, we begin the story of a lonely little girl, an extraordinary giant, and a friendship that neither of them ever expected to find. Yes, the more sunshines, the better. Dusk, yes, 29 with a few years of experience. A tale of dreams, adventure, and discovering that even in the biggest world, the smallest acts of kindness can change everything. So wherever you're listening from, dim the lights, sit back, and relax, because story time is about to begin. This is The BFG by Roald Dahl. The Witching Hour. Sophie couldn't sleep. A brilliant moonbeam was slanting through a gap in the curtains. It was shining right onto her pillow. The other children in the dormitory had been asleep for hours. Sophie closed her eyes and lay quite still. She tried very hard to doze off. It was no good. The moonbeam was like a silver blade slicing through the room onto her face. The house was absolutely silent. No voices came up from downstairs. There were no footsteps on the floor above either. The window behind the curtain was wide open, but nobody was walking on the pavement outside. No cars went by on the street. Not the tiniest sound could be heard anywhere. Sophie had never known such a silence. Perhaps, she told herself, this was what they called the witching hour. The witching hour, somebody had once whispered to her, was a special moment in the middle of the night when every child and every grown-up was in a deep, deep sleep, and all the dark things came out from hiding and had the world to themselves. The moonbeam was brighter than ever on Sophie's pillow. She decided to get out of bed and close the gap in the curtains. You got punished if you were caught out of bed after lights out, even if you said you had to go to the lavatory. That was not accepted as an excuse, and they punished you just the same. But there was no one about now. Sophie was sure of that. She reached out for her glasses that lay on the chair beside her bed. They had steel rims and very thick lenses, and she could hardly see a thing without them. She put them on, then slipped out of bed and tiptoed over to the window. When she reached the curtains, Sophie hesitated. She longed to duck underneath them and lean out of the window to see what the world looked like now that the witching hour was at hand. She listened again. Everywhere it was deathly still. The longing to look out became so strong she couldn't resist it. Quickly she ducked under the curtains and leaned out of the window. In the silvery moonlight, the village street she knew so well seemed completely different. The houses looked bent and crooked, like houses in a fairy tale. Everything was pale and ghostly and milky white. Across the road she could see Mrs. Rance's shop, where you bought buttons and wool and bits of elastic. It didn't look real. There was something dim and misty about that, too. Sophie allowed her eye to travel further and further down the street. Suddenly she froze. There was something coming up the street on the opposite side. It was something black, something tall and black. Something very tall and very black and very thin. Hey, crazy mama. How are you doing? I got you sneaking in here. Who? It wasn't a human. It couldn't be. It was 4 times as tall as the tallest human. It was so tall its head was higher than the upstairs windows of the houses. Sophie opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Her throat, like her whole body, was frozen with fright. This was the witching hour, all right. The tall black figure was coming her way. It was keeping very close to the houses across the street, hiding in the shadowy places where there was no moonlight. On and on it came, nearer and nearer, but it was moving in spurts. It would stop, then it would move on. Then it would stop again. But what on earth was it doing? Aha! Sophie could see now what it was up to. It was stopping in front of each house. It would stop and peer into the upstairs window of each house in the street. It actually had to bend down to peer into the upstairs windows. That's how tall it was. It would stop and peer in, then it would slide onto the next house and stop again and peer in, and so on all along the street. It was much closer now, and Sophie could see it more clearly. Looking at it carefully, she decided it had to be some kind of person. Obviously, it was not human, but it was definitely a person. A giant person, perhaps. Sophie stared hard across the misty moonlight street. The giant, if that was what he was wearing a long black cloak. In one hand, he was holding what looked like a very long, thin trumpet. In the other hand, he held a large suitcase. The giant had stopped now right in front of Mr. and Mrs. Gucci's house. The Gucci's had a green grocer's shop in the middle of High Street, and the family lived above the shop. The two Gucci children slept in the upstairs front room. Sophie knew that. The giant was peering through the window into the room where Michael and Jane Gucci were sleeping. From across the street, Sophie watched and held her breath. He saw the giant step back a pace and put the suitcase down on the pavement. He bent over and opened the suitcase. He took something out of it. It looked like a glass jar. One of those square ones with the screw top. He unscrewed the top of the jar and poured what was in it into the end of the long trumpet thing. Sophie watched, trembling. She saw the giant straighten up again, and she saw him poke the trumpet in through the open upstairs window of the room where the Gucci children were sleeping. She saw the giant take a deep breath, and whoof, he blew through the trumpet. No noise came out, but it was obvious to Sophie that whatever had been in the jar had now been blown through the trumpet into the Gucci children's bedroom. What could it be? As the giant withdrew the trumpet from the window and bent down to pick up the suitcase, he happened to turn his head and glance across the street. In the moonlight, Sophie caught a glimpse of an enormous, long, pale, wrinkly face with the most enormous ears. The nose was as sharp as a knife, and above the nose were two bright, flashing eyes, and the eyes were staring straight at Sophie. There was a fierce and devilish look about them. Sophie gave a yelp and pulled back from the window. She flew across the dormitory and jumped into her bed and hid under the blanket. And there she crouched, still as a mouse and tingling all over. The Snatch. Under the blanket, Sophie waited. After a minute or so, she lifted a corner of the blanket and peeped out. For the second time that night, her blood froze to ice and she wanted to scream, but no sound came out. There at the window, with the curtains pushed aside, was the enormous, long, pale, wrinkly face of the giant person staring in. The flashing black eyes were fixed on Sophie's bed. The next moment, a huge hand with pale fingers came snaking through the window. This was followed by an arm as thick as a tree trunk. And the arm, the hand, the fingers were reaching out across the room towards Sophie's bed. This time Sophie really did scream, but only for a second, because very quickly the huge hand clamped down over her blanket, and the scream was smothered by the bedclothes. Sophie, crouching underneath the blanket, felt strong fingers grasping hold of her, and then she was lifted up from her bed, blanket and all, and whisked out of the window. If you can think of anything more terrifying than that happening to you in the middle of the night, then let's hear about it. The awful thing was that Sophie knew exactly what was going on, although she couldn't see it happening. She knew that a monster, or giant, with an enormous, long, pale, wrinkly face and dangerous eyes, had plucked her from her bed in the middle of the witching hour, and was now carrying her out through the window, smothered in a blanket. What actually happened next was this. When the giant had got Sophie outside, he arranged the blanket so that he could grasp all four corners of it at once in one of his huge hands. With Sophie imprisoned inside, in the other hand he squeezed the suitcase and the long trumpet thing, and off he ran. Sophie, by squirming around inside the blanket, managed to push the top of her head out through a little gap just below the giant's hand. She stared around her. She saw the village houses rushing by on both sides. The giant was sprinting down High Street. He was running so fast his black cloak was streaming out behind him like the wings of a bird. Each stride he took was as long as a tennis court. Out of the village he ran, and soon they were racing across the moonlit fields. The hedges dividing the fields were no problem to the giant. He simply strode over them. A wide river appeared in his path. He crossed it in one flying stride. Sophie crouched in the blanket, peering out. She was being bumped against the giant's leg like a sack of potatoes. Over the fields and hedges and rivers they went, and after a while a frightening thought came into Sophie's head. The giant was running fast, she told herself, because he is hungry and he wants to get home as quickly as possible, and then he'll have me for breakfast. Water break. Yeah, Crazy Mama, I was saying earlier that I've never read this either. This is actually a cold read for me, so it should be interesting. The Cave. The giant ran on and on, but now a curious change took place in his way of running. He seemed suddenly to go into a higher gear. Faster and faster he went, and soon he was traveling at such a speed that the landscape became blurred. The wind stung Sophie's cheeks. It made her eyes water. It whipped her head back and whistled in her ears. She could no longer feel the giant's feet touching the ground. She had a weird sensation they were flying. It was impossible to tell whether they were over land or sea. This giant had some sort of magic in his legs. The wind rushing against Sophie's face became so strong that she had to duck down again into the blanket to prevent her head from being blown away. Was it really possible that they were crossing oceans? It certainly felt that way to Sophie. She crouched in the blanket and listened to the howling of the wind. It went on for what seemed like hours. Then, all at once, the wind stopped its howling. The pace began to slow down. Sophie could feel the giant's feet pounding once again over the earth. Excuse me. I'm not tired, I swear. Sophie could feel the giant's feet pounding once again over the earth. She poked her head up out of the blanket to have a look. They were in a country of thick forests and rushing rivers. The giant had definitely slowed down and was now running more normally, although normal was a silly word to use to describe a galloping giant. He leaped over a dozen rivers. He went rattling through a great forest, then down into a valley and up over a range of hills as bare as concrete. And soon he was galloping over a desolate wasteland that was not quite of this earth. The ground was flat and pale yellow. Great lumps of blue rock were scattered around, and somebody out there is yawning, and it keeps me. The ground was flat and pale yellow. Great lumps of blue rock were scattered around, and dead trees stood everywhere like skeletons. The moon had long since disappeared, and now the dawn was breaking. Sophie, still peering out from the blanket, saw suddenly ahead of her a great craggy mountain. The mountain was dark blue, and all around it the sky was gushing and glistening with light. Bits of pale gold were flying among delicate frosty white flakes of cloud, and over to one side the rim of the morning sun was coming up as red as blood. Right beneath the mountain, the giant stopped. He was puffing mightily. His great chest was heaving in and out. He paused to catch his breath. Directly in front of them, lying against the side of the mountain, Sophie could see a massive round stone. It was big as a house. The giant reached out and rolled the stone to one side as easily as if it had been a football. And now, where the stone had been, there appeared a vast black hole. The hole was so large, the giant didn't even have to duck his head as he went in. He strode into the black hole, still carrying Sophie in one hand, the trumpet and suitcase in the other. As soon as he was inside, he stopped and turned and rolled the great stone back into place so that the entrance to his secret cave was completely hidden from outside. Now that the entrance had been sealed up, there was not a glint of light inside the cave. All was black. Sophie felt herself being lowered to the ground. Then the giant let go the blanket completely. His footsteps moved away. Sophie sat there in the dark, shivering with fear. "He's getting ready to eat me," she told herself. "He will probably eat me raw, just as I am. Or perhaps he will boil me first. Or he will have me fried. He will drop me like a rasher of bacon into some gigantic frying pan sizzling with fat." A blaze of light suddenly lit up the whole place. Sophie blinked and stared. She saw an enormous cavern with a high, rocky roof. The walls on either side were lined with shelves, and on the shelves stood row upon row of glass jars. There were jars everywhere. They were piled up in the corners. They filled every nook and cranny of the cave. In the middle of the floor, there was a table 12 feet high and a chair to match. The giant took off his black cloak and hung it against the wall. Sophie saw that under the cloak he was wearing a sort of collarless shirt and a dirty old leather waistcoat that didn't seem to have any buttons. His trousers were faded green and were far too short in the legs. On his bare feet he was wearing a pair of ridiculous sandals that for some reason had holes cut out along each side, with a large hole at the end where his toes stuck out. Sophie, crouching on the floor of the cave in her nightie, gazed back at him through thick steel-rimmed glasses. She was trembling like a leaf in the wind, and a finger of ice was running up and down the length of her spine. "Ha!" shouted the giant, walking forward and rubbing his hands together. "What has us got here?" His booming voice rolled around the walls of the cave like a burst of thunder. Oh, sorry about that. The BFG. The giant picked up the trembling Sophie with one hand and carried her across the cave and put her on the table. "Now he really is going to eat me," Sophie thought. The giant sat down and stared hard at Sophie. He had truly enormous ears. Each one was as big as the wheel of a truck, and he seemed to be able to move them inwards and outwards from his head as he wished. "I is hungry," the giant boomed. He grinned, showing massive square teeth. The teeth were very white and very square, and they sat in his mouth like huge slices of white bread. Please don't eat me, Sophie stammered. The giant let out a bellow of laughter. Just because I is a giant, you think is a man gobbling cannibal? He shouted. You is about right. Giants is all cannibally and murderful, and they does gobble up human beings. We is in giant country now. Giants is everywhere around. Out there, us has the famous bone-crunching giant. Bone-crunching giant crunches up 2 wopsy-wiffled human beings for supper every night. Noise is ear-bursting. Noise of crunching bones goes crackety-crack for miles around. Ouch, Sophie said. Bone-crunching giant only gobbles human beings from turkey, the giant said. Every night Bone Cruncher is galloping off to Turkey to gobble Turks. Sophie's sense of patriotism was suddenly so bruised by this remark that she became quite angry. Why Turks? She blurted out. What's wrong with the English? Bone-crunching giant says Turks is tasting ever so much juicier, more scrum-diddly-umptious. Bone Cruncher says Turkish human beings has a glamourly favor. He says Turks from Turkey is tasting of turkey. I suppose they would, Sophie said. Of course they would, the giant shouted. Every human being is diddly and different. Some is scrum-diddly-umptious, and some is ucky slush. Greeks is all full of ucky slush. No giant is eating Greeks ever. Why not? Sophie asked. Greeks from Greece is tasting greasy, the giant said. I imagine that's possible too, Sophie said. She was wondering, with a bit of tremble, what all this talking about eating people was leading up to. Whatever happened, she simply must play along with this peculiar giant and smile at his jokes. But were they jokes? Perhaps the great brute was just working up an appetite by talking about food. As I am saying, the giant went on, all human beings is having different flavors. Human beings from Panama is tasting very strong of hats. Why hats? Sophie said. You is not very clever, the giant said, moving his great ears in and out. I thought all human beings was full of brains, but your head is emptier than a bundongle. Do you like vegetables? Sophie asked, hoping to steer the conversation towards a slightly less dangerous kind of food. You is trying to change the subject, the giant said sternly. We is having an interesting babblement about the taste of the human being. The human being is not a vegetable. Oh, but the bean is a vegetable, Sophie said. Not the human being, the giant said. The human being has 2 legs, and a vegetable has no legs at all. Sophie didn't argue any more. The last thing she wanted to do was make the giant cross. The human being, the giant went on, is coming in dillions of different flavors. For instance, human beings from Wales is tasting very whooshy of fish. There is something very fishy about Wales. You mean Wales? Sophie said. Wales is something completely different. Wales is Wales, the giant said. Don't gobble funk around with words. I will now give you another example. Human beings from Jersey has a most disgustably woolly tickle in the tongue, the giant said. Human beings from Jersey is tasting of cardigans. You mean jerseys, Sophie said. You are once again gobble-funking.
the giant shouted. "Don't do it. This is a serious and snitching subject. May I continue?"
"Please do," Sophie said.
"Danes from Denmark is tasting ever so much of dogs," the giant went on.
"Of course," Sophie said. "They taste of Great Danes."
"Wrong!" cried the giant, slapping his thigh. "Danes from Denmark is tasting doggy because they is tasting of Labradors."
"Then what do the people of Labrador taste of?" Sophie asked.
"Danes!" the giant cried triumphantly. "Great Danes!"
"Aren't you getting a bit mixed up?" Sophie said.
"I is a very mixed-up giant," the giant says. "But I does do my best, and I is not nearly as mixed up as the other giants. I know one who gallops all the way to Wellington for his supper."
"Wellington?" Sophie said. "Where is Wellington?"
"Your head is full of squashed flies," the giant said. "Wellington is in New Zealand. The human beings in Wellington has an especially scrumdiddly-umptious taste. So says the welly-eating giant."
"What do people of Wellington taste of?" Sophie asked.
"Boots," the giant said.
"Of course," Sophie said. "I should have known." Sophie decided that this conversation had now gone on long enough. If she was going to be eaten, she'd rather get it over and done with right away than be kept hanging around any more. "What sort of human beings do you eat?" she asked, trembling.
"Me!"
shouted the giant, his mighty voice making the glass jars rattle on their shelves.
"Me gobbling up human beings. This I never. The others, yes. All the others is gobbling them up every night, but not me. I is a freaky giant. I is a nice and jumbly giant. I is the only nice and jumbly giant in giant country. I is the big friendly giant. I is the BFG. What is your name?"
"My name is Sophie," Sophie said, hardly daring to believe the good news she had just heard. Damn, 57,000 likes. Wow. Oh, how high are you going to get me tonight? The Giants. "But if you are so nice and friendly," Sophie said, "then why did you snatch me from my bed and run away with me?"
"Because you saw me," the big friendly giant answered. "If anyone is ever seeing a giant, he or she must be taken away Ipswich."
"Why?" asked Sophie.
"Well, first of all," said the BFG, "human beings is not really believing in giants, is they? Human beings is not thinking we exist."
"I do," Sophie said.
"Ah, but that is only because you has seen me," cried the BFG. "I cannot possibly allow anyone, even little girls, to be seeing me and staying at home. The first thing you would be doing would be scuttling around yodeling the news that you were actually seeing a giant. And then a great giant hunt, a mighty giant look-see, would be starting up all over the world, with the human beings all rummaging for the great giant you saw and getting wildly excited. People would be coming rushing and bushing after me with goodness knows what, and they would be catching me and locking me into a cage to be stared at. They would be putting me into the zoo or the bunkum house, with all those squiggling hippo dumplings and crocodile dillies."
Sophie knew that what the giant said was true. If any person reported actually having seen a giant haunting the streets of a town at night, there would most certainly be a terrific hullabaloo across the world.
"I will bet you," the BFG went on, "that you would have been splashing news all over the wonky world, wouldn't you, if I hadn't wiggled you away?"
"I suppose I would," Sophie said.
And that would never do," said the BFG.
"So what will happen to me now?" Sophie asked.
"If you do go back, you will be telling the world," said the BFG. "Most likely on the telly-bunkum box and the radio squeaker. So you will just have to be staying here with me for the rest of your life."
"Oh, no!" cried Sophie.
"Oh, yes."
Oh, excuse me. For a minute there, I sounded like Kool-Aid Man.
"Oh, yeah." "Oh, yes," said the BFG. "But I am warning you not ever to go whiffling about out of this cave without I is with you, or you will be coming to an ucky-mucky end. I is showing you now who is going to eat you up if they is ever catching even one tiny little glimpse of you."
The big friendly giant picked Sophie off the table and carried her to the cave entrance. He rolled the huge stone to one side and said,
"Peep out over there, little girl, and tell me what you is seeing."
Sophie, sitting on the BFG's hand, peeped out of the cave. The sun was up now and shining fiery hot over the great yellow wasteland with its blue rocks and dead trees.
"Is you seeing them?" the BFG asked.
Sophie, squinting through the glare of the sun, saw several tremendous tall figures moving among the rocks about 500 yards away. 3 or 4 others were sitting quite motionless on the rocks themselves.
"This is giant country," the BFG said. "Those is all giants, every one."
It was a brain-boggling sight. The giants were all naked except for a sort of short skirt around their waists, and their skins were burnt brown by the sun. But it was the sheer size of each one of them that boggled Sophie's brain most of all. They were simply colossal, far taller and wider than the big friendly giant upon whose hand she was now sitting. And oh, how ugly they were! Many of them had large bellies. All of them had long arms and big feet. They were too far away for their faces to be seen clearly, and perhaps that was a good thing. "What on earth are they doing?" Sophie asked.
"Nothing," said the BFG. "There's just moochling and footchling around and waiting for the night to come. Then they will all be galloping off to places where people is living to find their suppers."
"You mean to Turkey?" Sophie said.
"Bone-crunching giant will be galloping to Turkey, of course," said the BFG. "But the others will be whiffling off to all sorts of flung-away places like Wellington for the booty flavor and Panama for the hatty taste. Every giant is having his own favorite hunting ground."
"Do they ever go to England?" Sophie asked.
"Often," said the BFG. "They say the English is tasting ever so wonderfully of crod scallop."
"I'm not quite sure what that means," Sophie said.
"Meanings is not important," said the BFG. "I cannot be right all the time, Quite often I is left instead of right.
And are all those beastly giants over there really going off again tonight to eat people? Sophie asked.
All of them is guzzling human beings every night, the BFG answered. All of them excepting me. That is why you will be coming to an ucky-mucky end if any of them should ever be getting his gogglers upon you. You would be swallowed up like a piece of frumpkin pie, all in one dollop.
But eating people is horrible, Sophie cried. It's frightful. Why doesn't someone stop them?
And who, please, is going to be stopping them? Asked the BFG.
Couldn't you? Said Sophie.
Never in a pig's whistle, cried the BFG. All of those men-eating giants is enormous and very fierce. They is all at least 2 times my wideness and double my royal highness.
Twice as high as you? Cried Sophie.
Easily that, said the BFG. You is seeing them in the distance, but just wait till you get them close up. Those giants is all at least 50 feet tall with huge muscles and cockles alive-o. I is the titchy one. I is the runt. 24 feet is puddle nuts in giant country.
You mustn't feel bad about it, said Sophie. I think you're just great. Why, even your toes must be as big as sausages.
Bigger, said the BFG, looking pleased. They is as big as bumplehammers.
How many giants are out there? Sophie asked.
9 altogether,
answered the BFG. That means, said Sophie, that somewhere in the world every single night 9 wretched people get carried away and eaten alive.
More, said the BFG. It is all depending, you see, on how big the human beings is. Japanese beans is very small, so a giant will need to gobble up about 6 Japanese before he is feeling full up. Others, like the Norway people and the Yankee Doodles, is ever so much bigger, and usually 2 or 3 of those makes a good tuck-in.
But these disgusting giants go to every single country in the world? Sophie asked.
All countries excepting Greece is getting visited sometime or another, the BFG answered. The country which a giant visits is depending on how he is feeling. If it is very warm weather and a giant is feeling hot as a sizzle pan, he will probably go north, galloping far up to the Frisbee north to get himself an Eskimo, or to cool him down. A nice fat Eskimo is to a giant is like a lovely ice cream lolly to you.
I'll take your word for it, Sophie said.
And then again, if it is a frosty night and the giant is fridging with cold, he will probably point his nose toward the sweltering hotlands to guzzle a few Hottentots to warm him up.
How perfectly horrible, Sophie said.
Nothing hots a cold giant up like a hot Hottentot, the BFG said.
And if you were to put me down on the ground and I was to walk out among them now, Sophie said, would they really eat me up?
Like a whiffswiddle, cried the BFG. And what is more, you is so small they wouldn't even have to chew you. The first one to be seeing you would pick you up in his fingers, and down you'd go like a drop of drain water.
Let's go back inside, Sophie said. I hate even watching them. I'm glad you guys are enjoying the voices. I wasn't, honestly, I kind of came up with them on, Sophie's a little girl, so that one's not too bad. But the BFG, honestly, I came up with it on the fly. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it until I started. Thank you, Care Bear. I appreciate you. Well, I'm glad you enjoy it. Well, thank you guys for all the likes and shares. We're at 83,000 likes. You guys are awesome. The Marvelous Ears. Back in the cave, the big friendly giant sat Sophie down once again on the enormous table.
"Is you quite snuggly down there in your nightie?" he asked. "You isn't fridgy cold?"
"I'm fine," Sophie said.
"I cannot help thinking," said the BFG, "about your poor mother and father. By now they must be jipping and scumping all over the house, shouting, 'Hello, hello, where is Sophie gone?'"
"I don't have a mother and father," Sophie said. "They both died when I was a baby."
"Oh, you poor little scrumplet," cried the BFG. "Is you not missing them very badly?"
"Not really," Sophie said, "because I never knew them."
"You is making me sad," the BFG said, rubbing his eyes.
"Don't be sad," Sophie said. "No one is going to be worrying too much about me. That place you took me from was the village orphanage. We're all orphans there."
"You is an orphan?"
"Yes."
"How many is there in there?"
10 of us, Sophie said. "All little girls."
"Was you happy there?" the BFG asked.
"I hated it," Sophie said. "The woman who ran it was called Mrs. Clunkers, and if she caught you breaking any of the rules, like getting out of bed at night or not folding up your clothes, you got punished."
"How is you getting punished?"
"She locked us in a dark cellar for a day and a night without anything to eat or drink."
"The rotten old rot-rasper!" cried the BFG.
"It was horrid," Sophie said. "We used to dread it. There were rats down there. We could hear them creeping about."
"The filthy old fizzwiggler!" shouted the BFG. "That is the horridest thing I is hearing for years. You was making me sadder than ever."
All at once, a huge tear that would have filled a bucket rolled down one of the BFG's cheeks and fell with a splash on the floor. It made quite a puddle. Sophie watched with astonishment. What a strange and moody creature this is, she thought. One moment he is telling me my head is full of squashed flies, and the next moment his heart is melting for me because Mrs. Clunkers locks us in the cellar. "The thing that worries me," Sophie said, "is having to stay in this dreadful place for the rest of my life. The orphanage was pretty awful, but I wouldn't have been there forever, would I?"
"All is my fault," the BFG said. "I is the one who kid-snatched you." Yet another enormous tear welled from his eye and splashed onto the floor. "Now I come to think of it, I won't actually be here all that long," Sophie said. "I is afraid you will," the BFG said.
"No, I won't," Sophie said. "Those brutes out there are bound to catch me sooner or later and have me for tea."
"I is never letting that happen," the BFG said.
For a few moments the cave was silent. Then Sophie said, "May I ask you a question?" The BFG wiped the tears from his eyes and with the back of his hand and gave Sophie a long, thoughtful stare.
"Shoot away," he said.
"Would you please tell me what you were doing in our village last night? Why were you poking that long trumpet thing into the Gucci children's bedroom and then blowing through it?"
"Aha!"
cried the BFG, sitting up suddenly in his chair.
"Now he is getting nosier than a Parker."
"And the suitcase you were carrying," Sophie said. "What on earth was that all about?" The BFG stared suspiciously at the small girl sitting cross-legged on the table.
"You is asking me to tell you big whopsy big secrets. Secrets that nobody is ever hearing before."
"I won't tell a soul," Sophie said. "I swear it. How could I anyway? I'm stuck here for the rest of my life."
"You could be telling the other giants."
"No, I couldn't," Sophie said. "You told me they would eat me up the moment they saw me."
"And so they would," said the BFG. "You is a human being, and human beings is like straw bunkles and cream to those giants."
"If they're going to eat me the moment they see me, then I wouldn't have time to tell them anything, would I?" Sophie said.
"You wouldn't,"
said the BFG. "Then why did you say I might?"
"Because I is brimful of buzzburgers," the BFG said. "If you listen to everything I am saying, you will be getting earache."
"Please tell me what you were doing in our village," Sophie said. "I promise you can trust me."
"Would you teach me how to make an elephant?" the BFG asked.
"What do you mean?" Sophie said.
"I would dearly love to have an elephant to ride on," the BFG said dreamily. "I would so much love to have a jumbly big elephant and go riding through green forests, picking peachy fruits off the trees all day long. This is a sizzling, hot, muck-frumping country as we live in. Nothing grows in it except snozcumbers. I would love to go somewhere else and pick peachy fruits in the early morning from the back of an elephant."
Sophie was quite moved by this curious statement. "Perhaps one day we will get you an elephant," she said, "and peachy fruits as well. Now tell me what you were doing in our village."
"If you is really wanting to know what I am doing in your village," the BFG said, "I was blowing a dream into the bedroom of those children."
"Blowing a dream?" Sophie said. "What do you mean?"
"I is a dream-blowing giant," the BFG said. "When all the other giants is galloping off every what way in which to swallow human beings, I is scuttling away to other places to blow dreams into the bedrooms of sleeping children. Nice dreams, lovely golden dreams, dreams that is giving the dreamers a happy time."
"Now, hang on a minute," Sophie said. "Where do you get these dreams?"
"I collect them,"
the BFG said, waving an arm towards all the rows and rows of bottles on the shelves.
"I has billions of them."
"You can't collect a dream," Sophie said. "A dream isn't something you can catch hold of." "Oh, thank you, Nugget. I appreciate that."
"You is never going to understand about it," the BFG said. "That is why is not wishing to tell you."
"Oh, please tell me," Sophie said. "I will understand. Go on. Tell me how you collect dreams. Tell me everything." The BFG settled himself comfortably in his chair and crossed his legs.
"Dreams," he said, "is very mysterious things. They is floating around in the air like wispy, misty bubbles, and all the time they is searching for sleeping people.
Can you see them? Sophie asked.
Never at first.
Then how do you catch them if you can't see them? Sophie said.
Aha, said the BFG. Now he is getting on to the dark and dusky secrets.
I won't tell a soul.
I is trusting you,
the BFG said. He closed his eyes and sat quite still for a moment while Sophie waited.
A dream, he said, as it goes whiffling through the night air, is making a tiny little buzzing humming noise. But this little buzzy hum is so silvery soft it is impossible for a human being to be hearing it.
Can you hear it? Sophie asked. The BFG pointed up at his enormous truck-wheel ears, which he now began to move in and out. He performed this exercise proudly, with a little proud smile on his face.
Is you seeing these? He asked.
How could I miss them? Sophie said.
They may be as looking a bit preposterous to you, the BFG said. But you must believe me when I say they is very extra usual ears indeed. They is not to be coughed at.
I'm quite sure they're not, Sophie said.
They is allowing me to hear absolutely every single twiddly little thing.
You mean you can hear things I can't hear? Sophie said.
You is deaf as a dumpling compared with me, cried the BFG. You is only hearing thumping loud noises with those little earwigs of yours. But I am hearing all the secret whisperings of the world.
Such as what? Sophie asked.
In your country, he said, I is hearing the footsteps of a ladybird as she goes walking across a leaf.
Honestly? Sophie said, beginning to be impressed.
What is more, I is hearing those footsteps very loud, the BFG said. When a ladybird is walking across a leaf, I is hearing her feet going clumpety, clumpety, clump, like giant's footsteps.
Good gracious me, Sophie said. What else can you hear?
I is hearing the little ants chittering to each other as they scuttle around in the soil.
You mean you can hear ants talking?
Every single word, the BFG said, although I is not exactly understanding their language.
Go on, Sophie said.
Sometimes, on a clear night, the BFG said, and if I is swiggling my ears in the right direction,
and here he swiveled his great ears upwards so they were facing the ceiling.
If I is swiggling like this, and the night is very clear, I is sometimes hearing faraway music from the stars in the sky.
A queer little shiver passed through Sophie's body. She sat very quiet, waiting for more.
My ears is what told me you was watching me out of your window last night, the BFG said.
But I didn't make a sound, Sophie said.
I was hearing your heart beating across the road, the BFG said, loud as a drum.
Go on, Sophie said. Please.
I can hear plants and trees.
Do they talk? Sophie asked.
They is not exactly talking, the BFG said, but they is making noises. For instance, if I come along and I is picking a lovely flower, if I is twisting the stem of the flower till it breaks, the plant is screaming. I can hear it screaming, and screaming very clear.
You don't mean it, Sophie cried. How awful.
It is screaming just like you would be screaming if someone was twisting your arm right off.
Is that really true? Sophie asked.
You think I is Swiss-figgling you?
It is rather hard to believe.
Then I is stopping right here, said the BFG sharply. I is not wishing to be called a fibster.
Oh, no, I'm not calling you anything, Sophie cried. I believe you. I do really. Please go on. The BFG gave her a long, hard stare. Sophie looked right back at him, her face open to his. I believe you, she said softly. She had offended him. She could see that.
I wouldn't ever be fibbling to you, he said.
I know you wouldn't, Sophie said, but you must understand that it isn't easy to believe such amazing things straight away.
I understand that, the BFG said.
So do please forgive me and go on, she said. He waited a while longer, and then he said,
It is the same with trees as it is with flowers. If I is chopping an axe into the trunk of a big tree, I is hearing a terrible sound coming from inside the heart of the tree.
What sort of sound? Sophie asked.
A soft, moaning sound, the BFG said. It is like the sound of an old man is making when he is dying slowly.
He paused. The cave was very silent.
Trees is living and growing just like you and me, he said. They is alive, so is plants.
He was sitting very straight in his chair now, his hands clasped tightly together in front of him. His face was bright, his eyes round and bright as two stars.
Such wonderful and terrible sounds I is hearing, he said. Some of them you would never wish to be hearing yourself, but some is like glorious music.
He seemed to be almost transfigured by the excitement of his thoughts. His face was beautiful in its blaze of emotions. Tell me more about them, Sophie said quietly.
You just ought to be hearing the little mices talking, he said. Little mices is always talking to each other, and I is hearing them loud as my own voice.
What do they say? Sophie asked.
Only the mices know that, he said. Spiders is also talking a great deal. You might not be thinking it, but spiders is the most tremendous natterboxes. And when they is spinning their webs, they is singing all the time. They is singing sweeter than a nightingale.
What else do you hear? Sophie asked.
One of the biggest chatbags is the cattle piddlers, said the BFG.
What do they say?
They is arguing all the time about who is going to be the prettiest butterfly. That is all they ever talk about.
Is there a dream floating around here right now? Sophie asked. The BFG moved his great ears this way and that, listening intently. He shook his head.
There is no dream in here, he said, except in the bottles. I has a special place to go for catching dreams. They is not often coming to giant country.
How do you catch them?
The same way you is catching buttery flies, the BFG answered. With a net.
He stood up and crossed over to a corner of the cave where a pole was leaning against the wall. The pole was about 30 feet long, and there was a net on the end of it.
Here is the dream catcher, he said, grasping the pole in one hand. Every morning I is going out and snitching new dreams to put in my bottles.
Suddenly, he seemed to lose interest in the conversation.
"I is getting hungry," he said. "It is time for eats."
Get some water here. I got to admit the voice is tough on my throat, but that's okay. It's worth it. Snozcumbers. But if you don't eat people like all the others, Sophie said, then what do you live on?
"That is a squelchy, tricky problem around here," the BFG answered. "In this slosh-flunking giant country, happy eats like pineapples and pigwinkles is simply not growing. Nothing is growing except for one extremely icky-poo vegetable. It is called the snozcumber."
The snozcumber? Cried Sophie. There's no such thing. The BFG looked at Sophie and smiled, showing about 20 of his square white teeth.
"Yesterday," he said, "we was not believing in giants, was we? Today we is not believing in snozcumbers. Just because we happen not to have actually seen something with our own two little winkies, we think it is not existing. But what about, for instance, the great squizzly Scotch hopper?"
I beg your pardon? Sophie said.
"And the humpercrimp?"
What's that? Sophie said.
"And the rap rascal?"
The what? Sophie said.
"And the crumpscuttle?"
Are they animals? Sophie asked.
"There's common animals," said the BFG contemptuously. "I is not a very know-all giant myself, but sometimes to me that you is an absolutely know-nothing human being. Your brain is full of rotten wool."
You mean cotton wool, Sophie said.
"What I mean and what I say is two different things," the BFG announced rather grandly. "I will now show you a snozcumber."
The BFG flung open a massive cupboard and took out the weirdest-looking thing Sophie had ever seen. It was about half as long again as an ordinary man, but it was much thicker. It was as thick around its girth as a preambulator. It was black with white stripes along its length, and it was covered all over with coarse knobbles.
"Here is the repulsant snozcumber," cried the BFG, waving it about. "I squoggle it. I mispise it. I dispunge it. But because I is refusing to gobble up human beings like other giants, I must spend my life guzzling up icky poo snozcumbers instead. If I don't, I will be nothing but skin and groans."
You mean skin and bones, Sophie said.
"I know it is bones," the BFG said. "But please understand that they cannot be helping it if I sometimes is saying things a little squiggly. I is trying my very best all the time."
The big friendly giant looked suddenly so forlorn that Sophie got quite upset. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to be rude."
There never was any schools to teach me talking in giant country," the BFG said sadly.
"But couldn't your mother have taught you?" Sophie asked.
"My mother!" cried the BFG. "Giants don't have mothers. Surely you is knowing that."
I did not know that, Sophie said.
Whoever heard of a woman giant? Shouted the BFG, waving a snozcumber around his head like a lasso. There was never a woman giant, and there never will be one. Giants is always men.
Sophie felt herself getting a little muddled. In that case, she said, how were you born?
Giants isn't born, the BFG answered. Giants appears, and that is all there is to it. They simply appears the same way as the sun and the stars.
And when did you appear? Sophie asked.
Now how on earth could I be knowing a thing like that? Said the BFG. It was so long ago I couldn't count.
You mean you don't even know how old you are?
No giant is knowing that, the BFG said. All I is knowing about myself is that I is very old. Very, very old and crumply, perhaps as old as the earth.
What happens when a giant dies? Sophie asked.
Giants is never dying, the BFG answered. Sometimes and quite suddenly a giant is disappearing and nobody is ever knowing where he goes to. But mostly us giants is simply going on and on like whiffsy time twiddlers.
The BFG was still holding the awesome snozcumber in his right hand, and now he put one end into his mouth and bit off a huge hunk of it. He started crunching it up, and the noise he made was like the crunching of lumps of ice.
"Is filthing,"
he sputtered, speaking with his mouth full and spraying large pieces of snozcumbers like bullets in Sophie's direction. Sophie hopped around on the table, ducking out of the way.
"Is disgusterous," the BFG gurgled. "It's sickable. It's rotsome. It's maggot-wise. Try it yourself, this foulsome snozcumber."
"No, thank you," Sophie said, backing away.
"It's all you're going to be guzzling around here from now on, so you might as well get used to it," said the BFG. "Go on, you snipsy little winkle, have a go."
Sophie took a small nibble. "Ugh!" she spluttered. "Oh, no! Oh, gosh! Oh, help!" She spat it out quickly. "It tastes of frog skins," she gasped, "and rotten fish."
"Worse than that," cried the BFG, roaring with laughter. "To me it is tasting of cockroaches and slime wanglers."
"Do we really have to eat it?" Sophie said.
"You do, unless you is wanting to become so thin you will be disappearing into a thick ear."
"Into thin air," Sophie said. "A thick ear is something quite different." Once again that sad, winsome look came into the BFG's eyes.
"Words," he said, "is such a twitch-winkling problem to me all my life. So you must simply try to be patient and stop squibbling. As I am telling you before, I know exactly what words I am wanting to say, but somehow or other they is always getting squiddled around."
"That happens to everyone," Sophie said.
"Not like it happens to me," the BFG said. "I is speaking the most terrible Wiglish."
"I think you speak beautifully," Sophie said.
"You do?" cried the BFG, suddenly brightening. "You really do?"
"Simply beautifully," Sophie repeated.
"Well, that's the nicest present anybody is ever giving me in my whole life," cried the BFG. "Are you sure you is not twiddling my leg?"
"Of course not," Sophie said. "I just love the way you talk."
"A wonder, Crump!" cried the BFG, still beaming. "How whoopsie splunkers! How absolutely squiffling! I is all of a stutter."
"Listen," Sophie said. We don't have to eat snozcumbers. In the fields around our village, there are all sorts of lovely vegetables like cauliflowers and carrots. Why don't you get some of those next time you go visiting?" The BFG raised his great head proudly in the air.
"I is a very honorable giant," he said. "I would rather be chewing up rotten snozcumbers than snitching things from other people."
"You stole me," Sophie said.
"I did not steal you very much," said the BFG, smiling gently. After all, you is only a tiny little girl."
"How cleverly, you're very welcome." "Hey, Rita. Didn't see you come in." "Kayla York, thank you. I hope you sleep well." The Blood Bottler. Suddenly, a tremendous thumping noise came from outside the cave entrance, and a voice like thunder shouted,
"Runt! Is you there, Runt? I is hearing you jabbling. Who is you jabbling to, Runt?" "Look out!" cried the BFG. "It's the Blood Bottler." But before he had finished speaking, the stone was rolled aside, and a 50-foot giant more than twice as tall and wide as the BFG came striding into the cave. He was naked except for a dirty little piece of cloth around his bottom. Sophie was on the tabletop. The enormous, partly eaten snozcumber was lying near her. She ducked behind it. The creature came clumping into the cave and stood towering over the BFG. "Who is you jabbling to in here just now?"
"Oh, excuse me. Fair time to get the hiccups," he boomed.
"I is jabbling to myself," the BFG answered. "Piffle fizz!" shouted the Blood Bottler. "Bugs wallop!" he boomed. "You is talking to a human being. That is what I is thinking." "No," cried the BFG. Yes, boomed the Blood Bottler. "I is guessing you has snitched away a human being and brought it back to your bunghole as a pet." Bunghole. "So now I is winkling it out and guzzling it as extra snacks before my supper." The poor BFG was very nervous. "There is no one here," he stammered. "Why don't you leave me alone?" The Blood Bottler pointed a finger as large as a tree trunk at the BFG. "Runty little scrum-screwer," he shouted. "Piffling little swish-figler. Squimpy little bottle-wart. Pruny little pog-swizzler. I is now going to search the primroses." He grabbed the BFG by the arm. "And you is going to help me do it. Us together is going to winkle out this tasteful little human being," he shouted. The BFG had intended to whisk Sophie off the table as soon as he got the chance and hide her behind his back. But now there was no hope of doing this. Sophie peered round the chewed-off end of the enormous snozcumber, watching the two giants as they moved away down the cave. The Blood Bottler was a gruesome sight. His skin was reddish-brown. There was black hair sprouting on his chest and arms and on his stomach. The hair on his head was long and dark and tangled. His foul face was round and squashy-looking. The eyes were tiny black holes. The nose was small and flat, but the mouth was huge. It spread right across the face, almost ear to ear, and it had lips that were like two gigantic purple frankfurters lying on top of the other.
craggy yellow teeth stuck out between the two purple Frankfurter lips, and rivers of spit ran down over the chin. It was not in the least difficult to believe that this ghastly brute ate men, women, and children every night. The blood bottler, still holding the BFG by the arm, was examining the rows and rows of bottles.
"You and your pibbling bottles," he shouted. "What is you putting in them?" "Nothing that would interest you," the BFG answered. "You is only interested in guzzling human beings." "And you is dotty dog swaggler," cried the blood bottler. Soon the blood bottler would be coming back, Sophie told herself, and he was bound to search the tabletop, but she couldn't possibly jump off the table. It was 12 feet high. She'd break a leg. The snozcumber, although it was as thick as a perambulator, it was not going to hide her if the blood bottler picked it up. She examined the chewed-off end. It had large seeds in the middle, each one as big as a melon. They were embedded in soft, slimy stuff, taking care to stay out of sight. Sophie reached forward and scooped away a half a dozen of these seeds. This left a hole in the middle of the snozcumber large enough for her to crouch in, so long as she rolled herself up into a ball. She crawled into it. It was a wet and slimy hiding place. But what did that matter if it was going to save her from being eaten? The blood bottler and the BFG were coming back towards the table now. The BFG was nearly fainting with fear. Any moment, he was telling himself, Sophie would be discovered and eaten. Suddenly, the blood bottler grabbed the half-eaten snozcumber. The BFG stared at the bare table. "Sophie, where is you?" he thought desperately. "You cannot possibly be jumping off that high table. So where is you hiding, Sophie?" "So this filthing, rotsome garbage you is eating," boomed the blood bottler, holding up the partly eaten snozcumber. "You must be cockles to be guzzling such rub squash." For a moment, the blood bottler seemed to have forgotten about his search for Sophie. The BFG decided to lead him further off the track. "That is the scrub-diddly-umptious snozcumber," he said. "I is guzzling it gleefully every night and day. Is you never trying a snozcumber, blood bottler?" "Human beans is juicier," the blood bottler said. "You is talking rummy tot," the BFG said, growing braver by the second. He was thinking that if only he could get the blood bottler to take one bite of the repulsive vegetable, the sheer foulness of its flavor would send him bellowing out of the cave. "I is happy to let you sample it," the BFG went on. "But please, when you see how truly glumptious it is, do not be guzzling the whole thing. Leave me a little snitchet for my supper." The blood bottler stared suspiciously with small piggy eyes at the snozcumber. Sophie, crouching inside the chewed-off end, began to tremble all over. "You is not switch-fiddling me, is you?" said the blood bottler. "Never," cried the BFG passionately. "Take a bite, and I am positive you will be shouting out how scrum-diddly-umptious this wonder-veg is." The BFG could see the greedy blood bottler's mouth beginning to water more than ever at the prospect of extra food. "Vegetables is very good for you," he went on. "It is not a whole healthsome always to be eating meaty things." "Just this once," the blood bottler said. "I is going to taste these rotsome eats of yours. But I is warning you that if it is filthsome, I is smashing it over your sludgy little head." He picked up the Snozcumber. He began raising it on its long journey to his mouth, some 50 feet up in the air. Sophie wanted to scream, "Don't!" but that would have been even more certain death. Crouching among the slimy seeds, she felt herself being lifted up and up. Suddenly, there was a crunch as the blood bottler bit a huge hunk off the end. Sophie saw his yellow teeth clamping together a few inches from her head. Then there was utter darkness. She was in his mouth. She caught a whiff of his evil-smelling breath. It stank of bad meat. She waited for the teeth to go crunch once more. She prayed that she would be killed quickly. "Ouch!" cried the blood bottler. And then he spat. All of the great lumps of Snozcumber that were in his mouth, as well as Sophie herself, went shooting out across the cave. If Sophie had struck the stony wall of the cave, she would most certainly have been killed. Instead, she hit the soft folds of the BFG's black cloak hanging against the wall. She dropped to the ground, half stunned. She crawled under the hem of the cloak, and there she crouched. "You little swine bugler," roared the blood bottler. "You little pig swiller." He rushed at the BFG and smashed what was left of the Snozcumber over his head. Fragments of the filthy vegetable splashed all over the cave. "You is not loving it?" the BFG asked innocently, rubbing his head. "Loving it," yelled the blood bottler. "That is the most disgusterous taste I is ever clutching in my teeth. You must be buggles to be swallowing sludge like that. Every night you could be galloping off happy as a hamburger to be gobbling juicy human beans." "Eating human beings is wrong and evil," the BFG said. "It is guzzly and glumptious," shouted the blood bottler. "And tonight I is galloping off to Chile to swabble a few human chili beans. Is you wishing to know why I is choosing Chile?" "I is not wishing to know anything," the BFG said, very dignified. "I is choosing Chile," the blood bottler said, "because I is fed up with the taste of Eskimos. It is important I has plenty of cold eats in this scuddling hot weather, and the next coldest thing to an Eskimo is a chili bean. Human beans from Chile is very chilly." "Horrible," the BFG said. "You ought to be ashamed." Other giants is all saying they is wanting to gallop off to England tonight to guzzle school chidlers," the blood bottler said. "I is very fond indeed of English school chidlers. They has a nice inky booky flavor. Perhaps I will change my mind and go to England with them." "You is disgusting," the BFG said. "And you is an insult to the giant peoples," shouted the blood bottler. "You is not fit to be a giant. You is a squinky little squiddler. You is a pibbling little pitsqueak. You is a cream puffnut." With that, the horrible blood-bottling giant strode out of the cave. The BFG ran to the cave entrance and quickly rolled the stone back into place. "Sophie," he whispered. "Sophie, where is you? Sophie!"
Sophie emerged from under the hem of the black cloak. "I'm here." The BFG picked her up and held her tenderly in the palm of his hand.
"Oh, I is so happy to be finding you all in one lump," he said.
"I was in his mouth," Sophie said.
"You was what?"
cried the BFG. Sophie told him what had happened.
"And there I was telling him to eat the filthsome snozzcumber, and you was all the time inside it," the BFG cried.
"Not much fun," Sophie said.
"Just look at you, you poor little chiddler," cried the BFG. "You was all covered in snozzcumber and giant spit."
He set about cleaning her up as best he could.
"I is hating those other giants more than ever now," he said. "You know what I should like."
"What?" Sophie said.
"I should like to find a way of disappearing them. Every single one."
"I'd be glad to help you," Sophie said. "Let me see if I can think of a way of doing it." Just let me check something here real quick. We'll see how far we get. Frobscottle and Whizpoppers. That's why I'm drinking water. A lot of water tonight. By now, Sophie was beginning to feel not only extremely hungry, but very thirsty as well. Had she been at home, she would have finished her breakfast long ago. "Are you sure there's nothing else to eat around here except those disgusting, smelly snozzcumbers?" she asked.
"Not even a fizzwinkle,"
answered the big friendly giant. "In that case, may I please have a little water?" she said.
"Water,"
said the BFG, frowning mightily.
"What is water?"
"We drink it," Sophie said. "What do you drink?"
"Frobscottle," announced the BFG. "All giants is drinking frobscottle."
"Is it as nasty as your snozzcumbers?" Sophie asked.
"Nasty!" cried the BFG. "Never is it nasty. Frobscottle is sweet and jumbly."
He got up from his chair and went to a second huge cupboard. He opened it and took out a glass bottle that must have been 6 feet tall. The liquid inside it was pale green, and the bottle was half full.
"Here is frobscottle," he cried,
holding the bottle up proud and high, as though it contained some rare wine.
"Delumptuous fizzy frobscottle," he shouted.
He gave it a shake, and the green stuff began to fizz like mad. "But look, it's fizzing the wrong way," Sophie cried. And indeed it was. The bubbles, instead of traveling upwards and bursting on the surface, were shooting downwards and bursting at the bottom. A pale green frothy fizz was forming at the bottom of the bottle.
"What on earth is you meaning the wrong way?" asked the BFG.
"In our fizzy drinks," Sophie said, "the bubbles always go up and burst at the top."
"Upwards is the wrong way," cried the BFG. "You mustn't ever be having the bubbles going upwards. That is the most flush-bunking rubbage I ever is hearing."
"Why do you say that?" Sophie asked.
"You is asking me why?"
cried the BFG, waving the enormous bottle around as though he were conducting an orchestra.
"You is actually meaning to tell me you cannot see why it is a scrotty mistake to have the bubbles flying up instead of down?"
"You said it was flush-bunking.
Now you say it's Scrotty. Which is it? Sophie asked politely.
Both, cried the BFG. It is a flush bunking and a scrotty mistake to let the bubbles go upwards. If you can't see why, you must be as quacky as a duckhound. By Ringo, your head must be so full of frog squinkers and buzzwangles. I is frittered if I know how you can think at all.
Why shouldn't the bubbles go upward? Sophie asked.
I will explain, said the BFG. But tell me first what name you is calling your frobscottle by.
One is Coke, Sophie said. Another is Pepsi. There are lots of them.
And all the bubbles is going up?
They all go up, Sophie said.
Catastrous, cried the BFG. Upgoing bubbles is a catastrous catastrophe.
Will you please tell me why? Sophie said.
If you will listen carefully, I will try to explain, said the BFG. But your brain is so full of bug whiffles, I doubt you will ever understand.
I'll do my best, Sophie said patiently.
Very well, then. When you is drinking this cokey drink of yours, said the BFG, is it going straight down into your tummy? Is that right, or is it left?
It's right, Sophie said.
And the bubbles is also going into your tummy, right or left?
Right again, Sophie said.
And the bubbles is fizzing upwards?
Of course, Sophie said.
Which means, said the BFG, that they will all come swish-whiffling up your throat and out of your mouth and make a fowsome belchy burp.
That is often true, Sophie said. But what's wrong with a little burp now and again? It's sort of fun.
Burping is filthsome, the BFG said. Us giants is never doing it.
But with your drink, Sophie said. What was it you called it?
Frobscottle, said the BFG.
With Frobscottle, Sophie said, the bubbles in your tummy will be going downwards, and that could have a far nastier result.
Why nasty?
Asked the BFG, frowning. Because, Sophie said, blushing a little, if they go down instead of up, they'll be coming out of somewhere else with an even louder and ruder noise.
A whiz-popper,
cried the BFG, beaming at her.
Us giants is making whiz-poppers all the time. Whiz-popping is a sign of happiness. It is music in our ears. You surely is not telling me that a little whiz-popping is forbidden among human beings.
It is considered extremely rude, Sophie said.
But you is whiz-popping, is you not, now and again?
Asked the BFG. I mean, everyone is whiz-popping, if that's what you call it, Sophie said. Kings and queens are whiz-popping, presidents are whiz-popping, glamorous film stars are whiz-popping, little babies are whiz-popping. But where I come from, it's not polite to talk about it.
Redunculous, said the BFG. If everyone is making whiz-poppers, then why not talk about it? We is now having a swiggle of this delicious frobscottle, and you will see the happy result. The BFG shook the bottle vigorously. The pale green stuff fizzed and bubbled. He removed the cork and took a tremendous gurgling swig. It's glummy, he cried. I love it. For a few moments the big friendly giant stood quite still, and a look of absolute ecstasy began to spread over his long, wrinkly face. Then, suddenly, the heavens opened, and he let fly with a series of the loudest and rudest noises Sophie had ever heard in her life.
They reverberated around the walls of the cave like thunder, and the glass jars rattled on their shelves. But most astonishing of all, the force of the explosions actually lifted the enormous giant clear off his feet like a rocket.
"Whoopee!" he cried, when he came down to earth again. "Now that is whiz-popping for you."
Sophie burst out laughing. She couldn't help it.
"Have some yourself,"
cried the BFG, tipping the neck of the enormous bottle towards her. "Don't you have a cup?" Sophie said.
"No cups, only bottle."
Sophie opened her mouth, and very gently the BFG tipped the bottle forward and poured some of the fabulous frobscottle down her throat. And oh gosh, how delicious it was! It was sweet and refreshing. It tasted of vanilla and cream, with just the faintest trace of raspberries on the edge of the flavor. And the bubbles were wonderful. Sophie could actually feel them bouncing and bursting all around her tummy. It was an amazing sensation. It felt as though hundreds of tiny people were dancing a jig inside her and tickling her with their toes. It was lovely. "It's lovely," she cried.
"Just wait,"
said the BFG, flapping his ears. Sophie could feel the bubbles traveling lower and lower down her tummy. And then suddenly, inevitably, the explosion came. The trumpets sounded, and she too made the walls of the cavern ring with the sound of music and thunder.
"Bravo!" shouted the BFG, waving the bottle. "You is very good for a beginner. Let's have some more."
Journey to Dream Country. After the mad frobscottle party was over, Sophie settled herself again on the top of the enormous table.
"You is feeling better now?" asked the big friendly giant.
"Much better, thank you," Sophie said.
"Whenever I is feeling a bit scrotty," said the BFG, "the few gollops of frobscottle is always making me hopscotchy again."
"I must say it's quite an experience," Sophie said.
"It's a raz-twizzler," the BFG said. "It's gloriumptuous."
He turned away and strode across the cave and picked up his dream-catching net.
"I is galloping off now," he said, "to catch some more whoopsie-whiffling dreams for my collection. I is doing this every day without missing. Is you wishing to come with me?"
"Not me, thank you very much," Sophie said. "Not with those other giants lurking outside."
"I is snuggling you very cozy into the pocket of my waistcoat," the BFG said. "Then no one is seeing you."
Before Sophie could protest, he had picked her up off the table and popped her into the waistcoat pocket. There was plenty of room in there.
"Is you wishing for a little hole to peep out from?" he asked her.
"There's one already," she said. She had found a small hole in the pocket, and when she put one eye close to it, she could see out very well indeed. She watched the BFG as he bent down and filled his suitcase with empty glass jars. He closed the lid, picked up the suitcase in one hand, took the pole with the net in the other, and marched towards the entrance of the cave. As soon as he was outside, the BFG set off across the great, hot, yellow wasteland where the blue rocks lay, and the dead trees stood, and where all the other giants were skulking about. Sophie, squatting low on her heels in the pocket of the leather waistcoat, had one eye glued to the little hole. She saw the group of enormous giants about 300 yards ahead.
"Hold your breaths," the BFG whispered down to her. "Cross your figglers. Here we go. We is going right past all these other giants. Is you seeing that whopping great one, the one nearest to us?"
"I see him," Sophie whispered back.
That is the horriblest of all, and is the biggest of them. He is called the flesh-lump-eating giant.
I don't want to hear about him, Sophie said.
He is 54 feet high, the BFG said softly as he jogged along, and he is swallowing human beings like they is sugar lumps, 2 or 3 at a time.
You're making me nervous, Sophie said.
I is nervous myself. I always gets jumpy as a jug hopper when the flesh-lumping giant is around.
Keep away from him, Sophie pleaded.
Not possible, the BFG answered. He is galloping easily 2 times as quicksy as me.
Shall we turn back?
Turning back is worse, the BFG said. If they is seeing me running away, they is all giving chase and throwing rocks.
They would never eat you, though, would they? Sophie asked.
Giants is never guzzling other giants, the BFG said. They is fighting and squirreling a lot with each other, but never guzzling. Human beings is more tasty to them.
The giants had already spotted the BFG, and all heads were turned, watching him as he jogged forward. He was aiming to pass well to the right of the group. Through her little peephole, Sophie saw the flesh-lump-eating giant moving over to intercept them. He didn't hurry. He just loped over casually to a point where the BFG would have to pass. The others loped after him. Sophie counted 9 of them altogether, and she recognized the blood bottler in the middle of them. They were bored. They had nothing to do until nightfall. There was an air of menace about them as they loped slowly across the plain with long, loping strides, heading for the BFG.
Here comes the runty one, boomed the flesh-lump-eater. Ho, ho there, runty one. Where is you splatch winkling away to in such a hefty hurry?
He shot out an enormous arm and grabbed the BFG by the hair. The BFG didn't struggle. He simply stopped and stood quite still and said,
Be so kind as to letting go of my hair, flesh-lump-eater.
The flesh-lump-eater released him and stepped back a pace. The other giants stood around waiting for the fun to start.
Now then, you little grob-squiffler, boomed the flesh-lump-eater. We is all of us wanting to know where you is galloping off to every day in the daytime. Nobody ought to be galloping off to anywhere until it is getting dark. The human beings could easily be spotting you and starting a giant hunt, and we is not wanting that to happen, is we not?
We is not, shouted the other giants. Go back to your cave, runty one. I is not galloping to any human being country, the BFG said. I is going to other places.
I is thinking, said the flesh-lump-eater, that you is catching human beings and keeping them as pets.
Right you is, cried the blood bottler. Just now I is hearing him chittering away to one of them in his cave. You is welcome to search my cave from back to front, the BFG answered. You can go looking into every nook and cranny. There is no human beans or stringy beans or runner beans or jelly beans or any other beans in there. Sophie crouched still as a mouse inside the BFG's pocket. She hardly dared to breathe. She was terrified she might sneeze. The slightest sound or movement would give her away. Through the tiny peephole she watched the giants clustering around the poor BFG. How revolting they were. All of them had piggy little eyes and enormous mouths with thick sausage lips. When the flesh lumper was speaking, she got a glimpse of his tongue. It was jet black, like a slab of black steak. Every one of them was more than twice as tall as the BFG. Suddenly, the flesh lumper shot out two enormous hands and grabbed the BFG around the waist. He tossed him high in the air and shouted, "Catch him, man-hugger!" The man-hugger caught him. The other giants spread out quickly in a large circle, each giant about 20 yards from his neighbor, preparing for the game they were going to play. Now the man-hugger threw the BFG high and far, shouting, "Catch him, Bone Cruncher!" The Bone Cruncher ran forward and caught the tumbling BFG and immediately swung him up again. "Catch him, child chewer!" he shouted. And so it went on. The giants were playing ball with the BFG, vying with each other to see who could throw him the highest. Sophie dug her nails into the sides of the pocket, trying to prevent herself from tumbling out when she was upside down. She felt as though she were in a barrel going over Niagara Falls. She felt as though there were all the time there was the fearful danger that one of the giants would fail to catch the BFG and he would go crashing to the ground. "Catch him, Meat Dripper! Catch him, Gizzard Gulper! Catch him, Maid Smasher! Catch him, Blood Bottler! Catch him! Catch him! Catch him!" In the end, they got bored with this game. They dumped the poor BFG on the ground. He was dazed and shattered. They gave him a few kicks and shouted, "Run, you little runt! Let us be seeing how fast you is galloping." The BFG ran. What else could he do? The giants picked up rocks and hurled them after him. He managed to dodge them. "Rutty little runt!" they shouted. "Troggy little twit! Shrively little shrimp, mucky little midget, squoggy little squib, grubby little grub." At last the BFG got clear of them. All, and in another couple of minutes, the pack of giants was out of sight over the horizon. Sophie popped her head up from the pocket. "I didn't like that," she said. "Phew," said the BFG. "Few and far between. They was in a nasty crouching mood today, was they not? I is sorry you was having such a whirligig time." "No worse than you," Sophie said. "Would they ever really hurt you?" "I isn't ever trusting them," the BFG said. "How do they actually catch the humans they eat?" Sophie asked. "They's usually just sticking an arm through the bedroom window and snitching them off their beds," the BFG said. "Like you did to me." "Ah, but I isn't eating you," the BFG said. "How else do they catch them?" "Sometimes," the BFG said, "they is swimming in from the sea like fishes, with only their heads showing above the water. Then out comes a big hairy hand and grabbles someone off the beach." "Children as well?" "Often chidlers," the BFG said. "Little chidlers who is building sandcastles on the beach. That is who the swimling ones are after. Little chidlers is not so tough to eat as old grandmama. So says the child's chewing giant." As they talked, the BFG was galloping faster over the land. Sophie was standing right up in his waistcoat pocket now, holding on to the edge with both hands. Her head and shoulders were in the open, and the wind was blowing in her hair. How else do they catch people? She asked.
All of them is having their own special ways of catching the human being, the BFG said. The meat-dripping giant is preferring to pretend he is a big tree growing in the park. He is standing in the park in the dusky evening, and he is holding great big branches over his head. And there he is waiting until some happy families is coming to have a picnic under the spreading tree.
Oh, crud.
The meat-dripping giant is watching them as they lay out their little picnic. But in the end, it is the meat-dripper who is having the picnic.
It's too awful, Sophie cried.
The gizzard-gulping giant is a city lover, the BFG went on. The gizzard gulper is lying high up between the roofs of houses in the big cities. He is lying there snuggy as a sniggler and watching the human beings walking on the street below. When he sees one that looks like it has a whoopsie-good flavor, he grabs it. He is simply reaching down and snitching it off the street like a monkey taking a nut. He says it is nice to be able to pick and choose what you is having for your supper. He says it is like choosing from a menu.
Don't people see him doing it? Sophie asked.
Never is they seeing him. Do not forget it is dusky dark at this time. Also the gizzard gulper has a very fast arm. His arm is going up and down quicker than Squinkers. But if all these people are disappearing every...
Wrong voice. But if all these people are disappearing every night, surely there is some sort of outcry, Sophie said.
The world is a big place, the BFG said. It has 100 different countries. The giants is clever. They is careful not to be skidding off to the same country too often.
Holy crap. Excuse me.
They is always switch fiddling around.
Even so, Sophie said.
Do not forget, the BFG said, that human beings is disappearing everywhere all the time, even without the giants is guzzling them up. Human beings is killing each other much quicker than the giants is doing it.
But they don't eat each other, Sophie said.
Giants isn't eating each other either, the BFG said, nor is giants killing each other. Giants is not very lovely, but they is not killing each other, nor is crocodile-dillies killing other crocodile-dillies, nor is pussycats killing other pussycats.
They kill mice, Sophie said.
But they is not killing their own kind, the BFG said. Human beings is the only animals that is killing their own kind.
Don't poisonous snakes kill each other? Sophie asked. She was searching desperately for another creature that behaved as badly as the human.
Even poisonous snake is never killing each other, the BFG said. Nor is the most fearsome creatures like tigers and rhinoceroses. None of them is ever killing their own kind. Has you ever thought about that?
Sophie kept silent.
I is not understanding human beings at all, the BFG said. You is a human being, and you is saying it is grisling and horrigust for giants to be eating human beings left or right.
Right, Sophie said.
But human beings is squishing each other all the time, the BFG said. They is shooting guns and going up in aeroplanes to drop their bombs on each other's heads every week. Human beings is always killing other human beings.
He was right. Of course he was right, and Sophie knew it. She was beginning to wonder whether humans were actually any better than giants. Even so, she said, defending her own race, I think it's rotten that those foul giants should go off every night to eat humans. Humans have never done them any harm.
That is what the little piggy-wig is saying every day, the BFG answered. He is saying, I has never done any harm to the human being, so why should he be eating me?
Oh dear, Sophie said.
The human beings is making rules to suit themselves, the BFG went on. But the rules they is making do not suit the little piggy wiggles. Am I right or left?
Right, Sophie said.
Giants is also making rules. Their rules is not suiting the human beings. Everybody is making own rules to suit himself.
But you don't like it that those beastly giants are eating humans every night, do you? Sophie asked.
I do not, the BFG answered firmly. One right is not making two lefts. Is you quite cozy down there in my pocket?
I'm fine, Sophie said. Then suddenly, once again, the BFG went into that magical top gear of his. He began hurtling forward with phenomenal leaps. His speed was unbelievable. The landscape became blurred, and again Sophie had to duck down out of the whistling gale to save her head from being blown off her shoulders. She crouched in the pocket and listened to the wind screaming past. It came knifing through the tiny peephole in the pocket and whooshed around her like a hurricane. But this time, the BFG didn't stay in top gear long. It seemed as though he had had some barrier to cross, a vast mountain perhaps, or an ocean, or a great desert. But having crossed it, he once again slowed down to his normal gallop, and Sophie was able to pop her head up and look out once more at the view. She noticed immediately that they were now in an altogether paler country. The sun had disappeared above a film of vapor. The air was becoming cooler every minute. The land was flat and treeless, and there seemed to be no color in it at all. Every minute the mist became thicker, the air became colder still, and everything became paler and paler until soon there was nothing but gray and white all around them. They were in a country of swirling mists and ghostly vapors. There was some sort of grass underfoot, but it was not green. It was ashy gray. There was no sign of a living creature, and no sound at all except for the soft thud of the BFG's footsteps as he hurtled on through the fog. Suddenly he stopped.
"We is here at last," he announced.
He bent down and lifted Sophie from his pocket and put her on the ground. She was still in her nightie, and her feet were bare. She shivered and stared around her at the swirling mists and ghostly vapors. "Where are we?" she asked.
"We's in dream country," the BFG said. "This is where all dreams is beginning."
All right. Well, it is now 11:15, and my voice is getting a little raw. I appreciate you guys very much. 186K. Jeez. All right. I'll tell you what. I'll make you a deal. I'll read another chapter. You guys try to get me to 200,000 likes. What do you say? Well, thank you. As for what time I do this, I go live 4 times a week.
Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It's always at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. We go to 11, sometimes a little later. Sundays and Mondays are family-friendly nights. And then Wednesday and Friday are for short stories, science fiction, horror, Edgar Allan Poe, Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, Stephen King, those kinds of things. So, all right. I will do one more chapter just because it's you guys. Get a little more water here. Holy cow, 193,000. Dream catching. The big friendly giant put his suitcase on the ground. He bent down low so that his enormous face was close to Sophie's.
From now on, we is keeping as still as winky little miceys, he whispered.
Sophie nodded. The misty vapor swirled around her. It made her cheeks damp and left dewdrops in her hair. The BFG opened his suitcase and took out several empty glass jars. He set them ready on the ground with their screw tops removed. Then he stood up very straight. His head was now high up in the swirling mist, and it kept disappearing, then reappearing, then appearing again. He was holding the long net in his right hand. Sophie, staring upwards, saw through the mist that his colossal ears were beginning to swivel out from his head. They began waving gently to and fro. Suddenly, the BFG pounced. He leapt high in the air and swung the net through the mist with a great swishing sweep of his arm.
"Got him!" cried. "A jar! A jar! Quick, quick, quick!"
Sophie picked up a jar and held it up to him. He grabbed hold of it, lowered the net. Very carefully, he tipped something absolutely invisible from the net into the jar. He dropped the net and swiftly clasped one hand over the jar.
"The top!" he whispered. "The jar top, quick!"
Sophie picked up the screw top and handed it to him. He screwed it on tight, and the jar was closed. The BFG was very excited. He held the jar close to one ear and listened intently.
"It's a wink squiffler," he whispered with a thrill in his voice. It's even better. It's a fizz wizard. It's a golden fizz wizard."
Sophie stared at him.
Oh my, he said, holding the jar in front of him. "This will be giving some little toddler a very happy night when I is blowing it in."
"Is it really a good one?" Sophie asked.
"A good one," he cried. "It's a golden fizz wizard. It is not often I is getting one of these." He handed the jar to Sophie and said, "Please be still as a starfish now. I is thinking there may be a whole swarm of fizz wizards up here today. And do kindly stop breathing. You is terribly noisy down there."
"I haven't moved a muscle," Sophie said.
"Then don't,"
the BFG answered sharply. Once again he stood up tall in the mist, holding his net at the ready. Then came a long silence, the waiting, the listening, and at last, with surprising suddenness, came the leap and the swish of the net.
"Another jar! Quick, quick, quick!"
When the second dream was safely in the jar and the top was screwed down, the BFG held it to his ear.
"Oh, no," he cried. "Oh, mince my maggots. Oh, swipe my swoggles."
"What's the matter?" Sophie asked.
"It's a troggle humper,"
he shouted. His voice was filled with fury and anguish.
"Oh, save our solos," he cried. "Deliver us from weasels. The devil is dancing on my dibbler."
"What are you talking about?" Sophie said.
The BFG is getting more distressed every moment.
"Oh, bash my eye bones,"
he cried, waving the jar in the air.
"I come all this way to get lovely golden dreams, and what is I catching?"
"What are you catching?" Sophie said.
"I is catching a frightsome troggle-humper. This is a bad, bad dream. It is worse than a bad dream. It is a nightmare."
"Oh, dear," Sophie said. "What will you do with that?"
"I is never, never letting it go," the BFG cried. "If I do, then some poor little toddler will be having the most curd-bloodling dream. This one is a real kicksy bog thumper. I is exploding it as soon as I get home."
"Nightmares are horrible," Sophie said. "I had one once and woke up sweating all over."
"With this one you would be waking up screaming all over," the BFG said. "This one would make your teeth stand on end. If this one got into you, your blood would be freezing to icicles, and your skin would go creeping across the floor."
"Is it as bad as that?"
"It's worse," cried the BFG. "This is a real wopsy gobswitcher."
"You said it was a troggle-humper," Sophie told him.
"It is a troggle-humper," cried the exasperated BFG, "but it is also a bog-thumper and a grob-switcher. It is all three into one. Oh, I is so glad I is clutching it tight. Ah, you wicked beastie, you," he cried, holding up the jar and staring into it. "Never more is you going to be bunk-doodling the poor little human beanie toddlers."
Sophie, who was also staring into the glass jar, cried out, "I can see it! There's something in there!"
"Of course there's something in there," the BFG said. "You is looking at a frightsome troggle-humper."
"But you told me dreams were invisible."
"They is always invisible until they is captured," the BFG told her. "After that, they is losing a little of their invisibility, and we is seeing this one very clearly."
Inside the jar, Sophie could see the faint scarlet outline of something that looked like a mixture between a blob of gas and a bubble of jelly. It was moving violently, thrashing against the sides of the jar, and forever changing shape. "It's wiggling all over the place," Sophie cried. "It's fighting to get out. It'll bash itself to bits."
"The nastier the dream, the angrier it is getting when it is in prison," the BFG said. "It is the same as with wild animals. If an animal is very fierce and you is putting it in a cage, it will make a tremendous rumple-dumpus. If it is a nice animal like a cockatoo or a froggle-frump, it will sit quietly. Dreams is exactly the same. This one is a nasty, fierce, bog-rotting nightmare. Just look at him splashing himself against the glass."
"It's quite frightening," Sophie cried.
"I would be hating to get this one inside me on a darksome night," the BFG said.
"So would I," Sophie said. The BFG started putting the bottles back into the suitcase. "Is that all?" Sophie asked. "Are we going?"
"I is so upset by this troggle-humping, bog-thumping grob-switcher," the BFG said, "that I is not wishing to go on. Dream-catching is finished for today."
Soon, Sophie was back in the waistcoat pocket, and the BFG was racing home as fast as he could. When at last they emerged out of the mist and came again to the hot yellow wasteland, all the other giants were sprawled out on the ground, fast asleep.
All right. Honestly, Yane, I kind of find the same thing. This is just because of practice. It's also what helps is the writing itself. Roald Dahl, while he uses nonsense words, they're not complicated nonsense words, and the regular words, he's not using any big complicated language. So, Suzanne, you're from Australia? Seriously? And I'm going to tell you why that's really freaking cool. So, I have been keeping track, and I'll tell you when I read in just a minute because this is really exciting. So, I am keeping track of all of the countries that have watched have watched my live streams. And so far, I'm like up to 30. Thank you, Wings. Up to 30 countries and all 7 continents, including Antarctica, because I actually had somebody from Scott Base watching, and Scott Base is New Zealand's research station down there. And you, Suzanne, are my very first Australian. So welcome. I love the fact that you're here, and I'm gonna mark Australia off on my map. So thank you for coming in. I'm really pleased, and I hope you come back and spend a lot more time with us. That is, yeah, Care Bear's right. Welcome to the family, because that's really what this is. See, everybody's welcoming you in. It is. This is a beautiful space to come for 2 hours and sit and listen to a story. I am currently in New York State. I'm in Western New York, right smack between Buffalo and Syracuse. I'm in Rochester. Everybody here is kind, and we get along. We take care of each other, and yeah. It's a beautiful space. But I am live Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday and Sunday and Monday are family-friendly nights where we read stuff like this. We've read The Phantom Tollbooth, A Wrinkle in Time, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. We recently did Bridge to Terabithia, Charlotte's Web. We've done Alice in Wonderland, which we did last week. We've done Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We have done a lot of different books. Wind in the Willows, great stuff. And Wednesdays and Fridays are for generally short stories. And we did The Wizard of Oz. Yes, Eddie, thank you for reminding me. I'm planning on doing the next book, so we'll see. But Wednesdays and Fridays are, no, I will be back tomorrow. Yes, A Bear Called Paddington. That was one we did recently too. Yeah, Susanna, I will be back on tomorrow night for the second half of the book. That's generally what we've been doing is Sunday and Monday. We do the first half and the second half of the book. I haven't yet run into a book again that I have to do 4 nights or 3 nights. So yes, New York time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. Not sure what that translates into with where you are. Yeah, see, 11 a.m., 11:30 a.m. Australia time. But yes, it is wonderful to have you here. I am so excited. Yeah. So, but it just makes me stupid happy that I get to add another country to my list. That's just awesome. That's awesome. Well, I am going to call it a night. And because it is now 11:30. Yes, I am planning on having a what? Did some No kidding. A new super fan. Thank you guys. That's awesome. That is absolutely wonderful. Well, I'm glad you guys enjoyed. So that's where we'll leave our story for tonight, with Sophie having discovered that not all giants are to be feared, and with a world of dreams waiting to be explored. VG, even when you're late, you are right on time, sir. Thank you all for spending a little time with me tonight by the fire. Join me again tomorrow night as we conclude the BFG and discover how one little girl and one big friendly giant can change the world. One dream at a time. And if you enjoy these stories and would like to help support what I do here, please consider subscribing, becoming a superfan, or visiting the UndeadPapa Mercantile. The link is in my bio. Every bit of support helps keep the campfire lit. Until then, please be kind to each other. And be kind to yourself, because kindness matters. And so do you. Good night, everybody. I apologize to you guys over on the tubes. It's hard to keep up with two chats. And I think I had you guys ended up being stuck behind my window. I'm trying to figure out a better way to keep you guys in the loop. We couldn't even do Wednesday because I had a guest live and I couldn't transmit to YouTube because you guys wouldn't be able to see the other half of the conversation. So, but I appreciate you guys being here. It is awesome. You guys are great, as well as the people on TikTok. You guys are awesome, and I am grateful for you guys. So you guys have a good night as well, and we'll see you again tomorrow.